everyone, it's Karen from Stitches and Things. Welcome to our Magic Squares blanket class. So today we're going to do the magic squares. So if you have a look at our magic squares blanket, it looks like a whole bunch of squares, but actually each square is knitted onto the next square. So the beauty of that is there is no sewing up at all in this blanket. There's a few ends to sew in at the end, but there's no sewing up. These little squares are commonly known as a mitered square. If you can just do the plain knit stitch, we can show you how to make this blanket. Our kits are $35 plus postage, and they come with their pattern as well. There's some diagrams in the picking up stitches, but we're just going to go through everything with you today. You can play back this video anytime you like, and then away you go to make this fabulous blanket that's a stunning piece and one of our most popular blankets. Let's get going. All right, this is a little square that I have already started, and I'll just explain to you what we've done here. In the pattern, it has a cast on of 59 stitches, and there are your 59 stitches. And the magic with this is our little decrease through here, where every second row we do a double decrease through the center, turns our cast on edge, which was a straight edge, turns it round the corner. So it gives us a border on two sides, and just got that double decrease through there. We also, in this pattern, we have some colour changes, so you can see we're changing colours. So what I'll do is I'll start with a colour change because that's where I'm up to. And then once we've got our colour change, you can see the pattern doesn't show the little marker, but I find that this is a really good little cheat, our little marker, which means I can do this without having to count, because for every single row in the pattern, it will tell you to knit so many stitches, then it'll tell you to do your decrease, and then you'll have to knit to the end. Whereas I prefer to knit till one stitch before my marker, put a new marker in, and then I'll do my decrease, so then I don't have to count and I can just blindly knit. All I have to do is keep an eye on how many rows I've knitted. So with this colour change, and you can see I'm using a circular needle. It's my preference to use a circular needle. This blanket does not need a circular needle. If you prefer straights, then use straight needles, but my preference is to use a circular needle. So you can see I've cut this tail off, and I'm ready to change colour. What I normally do is just hold that a little bit tight. Here's my new colour, which I'm not really prepared for. There we go. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to start knitting with my new colour without tying anything off. And I'm just going to keep this one on my finger for a little bit, just so that this stitch in here doesn't get loose. So what I like to do is to knit about 4 stitches. You can see this one's getting loose, but let's not panic yet. I like to knit 4 stitches, and then I'm going to stop and I'm going to tie these two tails together. Not too tight, we want to just tighten up both stitches, and I'm just going to tie a little knot. And now everything should be nice and firm. We've got no baggy stitch here, and this end stitch is nice and firm. So this is the right side of the square, so you can see it looks rather nice. So that's the right side. When we turn it over, just so you know where you're up to, when you have a look, you've got these 2 little colour change rows. So this is the back of your work, or what we call the wrong side of your work. So whenever we do a colour change, so you know that you're in the right spot, we always colour change on the right side. If you colour change on the opposite side, you'll have this double colour thing coming through on the wrong side. You'll know you've made a boo-boo if you don't have this sort of straight from one colour to the next happening, rather than having that little double colour change coming through. So this row is just knitted, and this is our row where we do our decrease. So normally with this row we would knit, we're up to, what's that, knit 8, and then we're going to do our decrease. But what I've done is I'm going to knit till I've got 1 stitch before my marker, and I'm going to place a new marker on my needle. So this is my decrease for the next row. I'm going to knit this next stitch. I'm going to put this one on my knee and use that next time. So our decrease is a slip one. We always slip purlways, so we're going to stick our needle in this way and slip it, so we're not going to knit it. Then we're going to knit 2 stitches together. So we're just going to put our needle through the 2 stitches, so you can see those are our 2 stitches. We're going to put our needle through our 2 stitches and we're going to knit those 2 stitches together. So those 2 stitches have now become one. And then this one, we're going to pass our slip stitch over those. So we've got rid of 1 stitch by knitting 2 together, and we've got rid of another stitch by passing that slip stitch over. So you can now see this little wrap stitch here, that was our pass the slip stitch over. And on our next decrease row, this stitch and this next stitch will be the 3 stitches that are involved in that decrease. So when you see my marker, we know that our marker shows just up to the decrease. When we knit the next row, because every time it's moving back one, I'm going to knit till 1 stitch before the marker, put a new marker in and take the old one out. Each time it's going back one. So all I'm doing by placing the new marker here is setting up for my next row. So this one we can simply just, and I knit continental, so don't mind my knitting style, we're just going to knit to the end, simply just knit. So we're not going to do any fancy at the end, we're just going to knit. Then we're going to turn ourselves around, and this is our wrong side row. Our wrong side row is simply just a knit row where you don't have to think at all. All you have to do, I've split that a little bit there, just a sec, better repair that. There we go. So we're just going to knit right the way across here. So what we do when we get to our little marker is simply slip our marker. So there's our marker on our needle. All we're going to do is flip that onto this needle, and then we are just going to knit to the end. So this one is just a simple knit, 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 knit. So main thing to do with this blanket is every time we finish a row, don't forget to make a note of how many rows you've done. If you don't, you'll find that you'll end up with rows that have got too many in them. Like these two have got an extra row in each, but these were just ones I was doing in front of the telly just to do a little sample for this blanket. So, oops, there goes my marker. Excuse me for a second because I'm going to need that now. So the next row is exactly the same as the right side row we just did. So I'm just going to do this row as well, just so that you've had a second look at what we're doing. So I'm just going to knit till I am 1 stitch before the marker. So you can see there's my 1 stitch before my marker. I'm going to put my marker on, knit up to the marker, remove it, and then we're going to do that decrease again. Slip 1 purlways, knit 2 together. There we go, knit 2 together and pass the slip stitched over. There we go. And knit to the end. So this pattern is just that simple 2 rows. The front row, we are doing our little decrease in the middle, which gives us this effect. And the second row is simply knit back. And all you're doing that continually, changing colours every 10th row until you have 3 stitches left. So then it's cast off, and then the next thing we do is we pick up the stitches along the edge to build our next square on, and I'll show you that little bit in just a minute. Right, we have got this square down to the row where we have got everything done on the right side, and we now have 3 stitches left. So this one, once we turn it over and we've got our 3 stitches left, on the back, in every other row we've just knitted across, but on this one we are just going to finish this off now with a simple slip 1, knit 2 together. Oh, that one's a bit tight. And I'll just knit 2 together and pass the slip stitch over. Give that a little pull. Then we're just going to pass our yarn through our little eye here. It should be really easy, but it doesn't want to go. Pass our yarn through our little eye and just pull that firmly. So that's our little square finished. This square normally has 6 stripes. It normally has a border, and then it'll have 5 more. This last little tiny one is also in your pattern, but I just for ease of getting it done quickly, I've just done that. You can, that little tiny one at the end, if you find that too fiddly, there is no reason why this last square can't be knit all the way to the end. I'm just going to show you quickly how to sew in your ends. I suggest that every time you complete a square, you sew in your ends. Now, there are some different needles on the market. I have 2 different ones here. One is a sharp and one is a dull needle. What we like to do is we like to sew our ends in with a sharp one so they don't come out. And we like to, if we've got a sew knitting up, which we're not going to in this one, but if you've got a dull needle, it's best saved for seams and sewing up rather than sewing your ends in. With the pointy one, what we're trying to do with the point is we're trying to split our fibres. So by splitting our fibres, it's quite firm and hard to pull out. When we use a needle that is dull, we can't split the fibres. We end up having to weave it. And when you weave it, it doesn't stay as firmly. So to keep your ends from falling out, use a nice sharp needle. Now, some of you might have some of these big hoofers in your kit. Save them for sewing up. They're quite good for sewing up, but forget about that for sewing your ends in. A lot of people come into the store looking for a needle with a really big eye because they can't thread them. Well, sewing your ends in with that, you may as well just cut them off because that is totally useless. They're just all going to pop out. So you can see the eye isn't that big on this needle, but all we need to do is pinch it over the needle, and you should be able to get about a 14 ply through that. Takes a little practice. So when we're sewing our ends in, we're going to try and sew our red through our red. And so all I'm going to do is I'm going to just try and split my fibres and sew my red thread through my red, and we want to go about 5 centimetres. If it's slippery yarn, which this one is, I shouldn't have let that go. If it's slippery yarn and you're worried about it popping out or it's going to get a lot of heavy use, I haven't got much tail there, we can actually go back the other way a little bit just for insurance. And we'll pop that through, and that can be trimmed off. So providing you put your colours, the colours match up, so blue on blue, red on red, you won't notice your ends. And if you split your ends, this is a bit short, so instead of going backwards, I'm just going to go a little bit further forward. So you can see, you can't even see them. See this one here, you can just see this is where we've done a colour change. I'm not sure what's happened there, so let's make sure that that's secure. Probably, I'm just going to stitch that through there, just in case that's a stitch that may come loose there if that end popped out, and that'll neaten that up. So then see how blue's up here. See how this has kind of gone up in the air a bit. I'd say that when I've done my colour change, I haven't kept those first few stitches tight enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up here into the blue, and then we're going to go across into our blue here to make that nice and invisible. But see how this looks a bit daggy, but on the other side it's fine. So don't panic too much if we don't have perfection. And look, most of the time if you have an imperfection, it's only you that will notice it, unless it's a really bad imperfection. But most tiny little blemishes, half the time once you've finished your blanket, you won't even know where you did it. So you can see they're sewn in. But yeah, just my suggestion with this blanket, because obviously this has got 6 colours in it, so you're going to have 12 ends for every square. So my suggestion is take a breather, sew your ends in, then start your next square. So we're now going to move on to how we join our next square on. Okay, I have made some mini squares so that I can show you quickly how to pick up the stitches on this blanket. So this here represents that very first square that we did before. So from here our blanket is knitted in strips. So this is our second square we've picked up along this edge. This will be our third square, and then we actually make six squares, in this strip, and we're going to make them one on top of the other till we have 6 in this strip. Our second strip is joined here, where we're picking up along here, and then this square is put on. The next square that gets put on after this is put in here, and then we will continue to build that till we'll have 2 rows of 6. Obviously once this strip is done, the next one will be here, and that is all in your instruction sheet. Now there are 3 different ways that we pick up stitches for this blanket, and I'm going to show you the three different ways we pick up. So again, we don't need a circular, we can just use a straight needle. So with this square, we're going to pick up 5 stitches along here. Then we're going to pick up 5 stitches in this section, and then we are going to cast on some extra stitches. So we're going to end up with our picked up stitches and then a bit hanging off the end, which will be like this one was, straight at the start. So what we're going to do is we're going to start right in our corner, and we're going to simply put our yarn over the top. Now this, to me, this first stitch is always the worst, getting that through, so it might take me a couple of goes. No, we got it first go. So that's all we need to do is pull that through, and we can leave this loose for now. So then we've got to fit 5 in here. So let's put our next one here. And all you do is using your tail, my ball's under my jumper, so I don't mind that. We're just going to knit it around and through. Stick it in the next one. So long as we get 5 pretty evenly along this strip here. So what we'll do, when we get back to this end, when we've knitted back this end, then we'll fix that. So we just see that's kind of a bit loose there, so we'll just make sure we've got enough meat there. We might, where are we going to go? We'll just go in here, I think. I actually knitted this one with a needle that was a fraction too big, because it was, and even the needle that I'm using now is too big for this yarn, but my 4mm tips are on something else and I was being a bit lazy. So we only need another 5 here. So if you knit continental, or if you're a crocheter, you can do this, which is usually the way I do it, is I just hook them through this way. And I need one, I might go back one actually. It doesn't look like we've got enough space here. One more there. And one right in the end. So we should now have 10. It's always so much easier when you're not got the camera on, isn't it? There we go. So we should have 10 there now. We'll fix this one up at the end. So then we need to cast on another 9 stitches. So there's 5, there's 10. So we're just going to turn ourselves around, and we're just going to cast on another 9 stitches, and cast the first few on a bit firmly, so that we don't end up with a gap. And when you're picking up stitches, we always need to pick them up on the right side of our work. And I am talking and not counting, so we must be just about there. We'll just do one more, I reckon, see if I'm a good guess or not. 5, 10, 14, 18, one more. All right, 19. So the picked up row now looks like this. It's going to hang out the end until we've done a few of the decreases, and then it will start to turn around the corner. So what we need to do now is this row here is classed as our first row. So this back row is just our regular knit along row. So what we'll do, I'm just going to knit to the end here and show you what to do with this loose little tail on this particular row. So, and then we might just, I'll just run back along here and we'll put our markers in so you can see where the markers should be. All right, so when we've got to this end, all I'm going to do is I'm going to tie this tail and the working yarn together, and that should keep that nice and firm. And I reckon I dropped a stitch off the end. But anyway, for the purpose of the exercise, that's picked up along there, which is what I've done for these. And we're ready to start row 3 where we have our decrease in here. So I've got 19 stitches here. The 3 centre ones will be where my decreases are. My marker will be here, and my new marker, that if I knitted along, my new marker would be in here. But that's the pickup of this one. So I'm just going to quickly pull that out, except I tied a knot in it, didn't I? So I'm going to quickly pull this one out, and then the next one, when we do this one, if we picked up first and then cast on, our border would end up going this way. So with this one, we need to cast on first and then pick up. So that's this square and this square next to it. So we're going to cast on our stitches first, and then we're going to pick up our stitches. So I'm just going to cast on 9 stitches. And I find with this blanket, the thumb method doesn't work. You have to do what we call the cable cast on, where we actually are putting our needle in behind those two and casting on this way. If you do the thumb method, you end up with a funny edge that doesn't match the rest of the garter stitch edge. So on your pattern, I think you've got to cast on 29, and then you're going to pick up 30 stitches, so 5 stitches for every colour. So that's our cast on. So now we need to turn around so that these are this way, and we're actually going to pick up our stitches starting from here. So what we need to do is we need to keep this one nice and firm. So if we just dig this one through and then make sure it's nice and firm. Otherwise you end up with a gap between here, and then we need to pick up another 4 along here. 1, 2, 3, 4. A lot of people are really scared of picking up stitches, but it's not so bad. I've just pulled a bit extra through. We'll just get rid of that. Go away, blue. Picking up stitches are not too bad, and if you've got a lot to pick up, we're lucky with this one because our colour changes. We know that we've got to put 5 stitches between each colour change. If you were doing the neck of a jumper, just divide it up so you can do, 8 or 10 stitches between each marker, and picking up stitches isn't that hard. It's just, and this is a great way of learning how to pick up your stitches. So now there's our 19 stitches. So if we were to knit this now, and this is our first row, we're going to knit straight across this one. This edge here, see this one here has gone around. This next one will also go around that way. So that's how we make sure that our border is going in the right direction. If you were to pick up first and then cast on, our border is going to go that way, and we're going to end up with our squares not lined up. So that's our picking up on this one. So the last one is rather interesting, and I'll just pull this one out so we can see that. The last one is, see how we got to put a square in here, and to do that we need to pick up along here and along here. So we've got 19 stitches to work with. So we should have, by rights, we should have 5, 5, 5 and 5 to make it work. But what we're going to do is our middle stitch we're going to put in here. So we're going to share, our 10th stitch is going to be shared with this square and this square. So we're going to have 5 and 5, and this one we're going to count as number 1 for here, and then we're going to put another 5 in here. And then that is your cast on, your pickup for here. Now the pattern does have diagrams with all of this stuff in it. We're just going to dig that through for our first stitch. And this is one of those ones where we're going to have to come back and tie that thread on at the end because it's hanging in thin air. Whereas the one where we cast on first, it's anchored, so we don't need to come back and tie that. Oh, it doesn't want to go, does it? 1, 2, 3. 4, 5, and you can see I'm taking a fair bit of meat there. Well, I shouldn't call it meat, but you know, but it just means that we're going to end up with a nice firm edge. There's nothing worse than a picked up edge that looks all lacy and loopy. So that is 5 for there. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this is our 4th one along here. Number 5 is our shared stitch, so it's going to go right smack bang in the corner between the squares. Actually, I might put it in there. And then the next square is only going to have 4 because we're sharing that stitch. We're going up the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we should have our 19 stitches, and you can see that we've gone, oh hang on, no we don't, I forgot the red. My cameraman's very quiet and not reminding me that I didn't quite do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, righto. Now we're right. Now we have the correct amount of stitches. So you can see now that we've gone across this square and we've gone up the side of this square, so we're kind of round the corner. So this again is row 1. So every square, once you've picked up and you've got your row 1 on your needle, every square is identical. Every square is knitted exactly the same. The only difference is how and where you pick it up. So the beauty of this blanket is you can make it as big as you like. Just keep adding squares in the you can make the strips longer, you can put more strips on, just keep adding and adding and adding if you want to. The kit gives us a 6 by 6 square blanket, which is about 1 metre by 1 metre. It has 7 balls of the extra soft Fiddlesticks Superb 8 in it, which is a premium acrylic. This could be knitted in wool. It does end up very heavy in wool, but it can be knitted in wool, and you'd have to get on to me about that. But that is our Magic Squares blanket tutorial. Please message me if you have any issues, but I think you'll find that once you've mastered your picking up of your stitches, and if you use that little marker as a cheat to know where you should be doing your decrease, if you're not sure where your decrease is going to go, if you count, so I'll count these, so there's 5 and 5, 2 and 2, so that's our 3 centre stitches. So this here is where our marker would be, so we could place our marker there. If we were going to knit along here, we would knit till 1 stitch before the marker and place our marker. So if you're confused when you cast on those 59 stitches where you should be, it should be 23 stitches. It'll be 22 stitches actually. 22 stitches, and place your marker, and then you'll have your centre 3 stitches are going to be your decrease, and you're going to go backwards 1 each time. If you prefer to count your stitches, that is on the pattern how many stitches you need to be counting, but my preference is not to be counting. So I hope you enjoyed our Magic Squares tutorial. It's been fun, and I think you'll find that this is going to be one of the most engaging projects. I love it because every square gets smaller, 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 and it really makes you rush to finish it because you can see the end coming quicker and quicker and quicker. And if you could make one square every night, it's only going to take a month, if you were slow, to knit a blanket. So have a go at this one. It is fabulous, and there's heaps of different variations in colour. If you don't want to do it in squares, so I'm going to show you this. If you don't want to do it in, sorry, not in squares, in stripes, you could have your border colour as one colour that's common throughout, and each square could be a full different colour. Or instead of having the 5 colours through here, you could have this was one colour and this was one colour. There are so many variations that you can do with this blanket. Some people might put a little between where the join is, they might put a yarn forward, knit 2 together and make a little eyelet row in here, and that looks quite pretty if you're doing a girl's blanket. So the beauty of it is that if you keep your border a constant colour, then you'll find that the rug will just tie itself together with whatever colours you use in your squares. We like to be a bit more uniform because it just looks quite fabulous, but there are so many ways you can use this pattern. It is a really good pattern. The last thing, which I forgot to mention, was when we finish, we're going to end up with 2 sides that don't have borders. So those are picked up exactly the same as we pick up our stitches for the rest of our blanket, and we put our last 2 borders on. There are 2 choices with this. You can use a circular and pick up the whole lot, 5 stitches for every square. If you don't have a circular, use your straight needles, pick up your stitches across 2 squares, knit that border, and you're just going to have a little seam that you can just sew up here if you don't have a circular. But my advice is grab yourself a circular, pick up one whole side of your border and then your second whole side of your border. But again, no sewing up, pretty fabulous. Thanks everyone.